lawyers, government affairs people, lobbyists, they have got, this ain't their first rodeo down this road.
Yeah.
And I'll be shocked if they do anything talk to anyone other than those who they're required to, say anything other than the party line. I mean, I would be shocked. Now, having said that, I've also been on the ground. I mean, I don't want to get into war stories, but Thailand. We were operating onshore Thailand. This wasn't, by the way, this is not Chevron, although they're there also. But we're onshore. We were operating onshore Thailand. The NGOs came in, had a lot of the same concerns, stopped us from drilling. Then they moved it offshore. Well, it killed exploration in Thailand. Nobody could move. Because the government was very responsive to the NGOs. There really wasn't anything behind the claims. It was just muscle flexing.
Yeah.
And they were able to shut them down because Thailand's Thailand.
Yeah.
And it killed exploration for 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
The only losers were the guys.
Yeah, this case is a little bit different because it's an acquisition, and it's a lucrative acquisition, and the environmental community here is very sophisticated, and I kind of think no one's going to benefit from a pissing match. So I want to...
Right, but the only part of this whole thing that I guess I want you to try to explain to me is this worse than with Noble staying there, and why?
Yeah.
Why is Chevron a threat, or is this just taking advantage of the fact that there's a change of hands, so it's an opportunity to make your point?
It's a couple things. One is
because I have a hard time believing Chevron is less responsible than that's where I'm having an issue here.
Well, it's interesting. For sure, Noble's a newer company, and they're more focused on gas than on oil. So, but the reputation of Chevron in the environmental community and in the indigenous rights community is very different than Noble. And
because Noble has no history,
right?
So there is no
right.
Well, that makes perfect sense,
right? But Noble also is, in a sense, teetering, which is why they're a good takeover prospect. Look, I think there is this magic moment that because there's about to be an attempt of change of the selling of the assets, that the environmental community knows how to use that change of assets to they want Israel to get prepared because they're not prepared for any. So that's an important.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and then the idea
with going solar, of course, made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so one is there's a time bound opportunity to kind of get Israel's in shape, both as you said on the solar and on the prep for just in case, and the other is the default of the environmental community here is that Chevron has to prove sort of what you were saying, that they're really going to be the most responsible and the most responsive, and that they're going to observe Israeli law, and that they do have knowledge and would take responsibility if, heaven forbid, there's a spill, and because they have to kind of demonstrate otherwise in terms of the environmental community. Now, look, Chevron's big, powerful. Maybe they can just think they can waltz in here and squish the environmental community. But I'm telling you, they're very feisty and sophisticated, and I just don't think it's in Chevron's interest to have the pissing match. And at the same time, I think it's the environmental community could be persuaded that if certain things happen, that Chevron's coming in good faith, but they're showing such bad faith in some of the track record. But they're after this lawyer Steve Dosinger that we want them just to drop the charges against him, drop all the files, and show some good faith, and let's open up a conversation about what would be the way forward.
I have no feel for that because I don't know the history of it. But
yeah,
I guess my only concern after Shai told me gave me your number and all was that there's some real data, real belief out there that Chevron was worse than an Exxon, or worse than a Shell, or worse than a BP. And I know from personal experience that simply isn't the case.
Okay.
In fact, I think I'm probably better than most, if not all of them. And I have no Chevron stock. I got nothing.
Yeah.
But as a California-based worse than California, as a San Francisco-based company.
Yeah.
The notion that these guys have death to environmental issues is kind of laughable.
Okay.
I mean,
so look, we have a certain.
You say you've been out of Africa. I think if you stack Chevron up against a Shell or BP or somebody with a long African history,
yeah,
it would look. They'd come out like Chevron would come out like white knights. Now you've got this Ecuador thing,
yeah,
which to me is a lot like the Myanmar thing, or other places where you're kind of between a rock and a hard place with the local regulators. But in terms of an environmental, that wasn't, from what I remember, that wasn't a case of an irresponsible or unsafe drilling or practices.
Mm-hmm.
That was the way the land was left at the bequest of the people who owned the land, but that didn't seem to matter. It was kind of my recollection of it.
Okay.
But I get it. I understand. I just wanted to understand, because if I'm going to talk to somebody at Chevron on behalf to see if I can make my connection, I need to understand. Do you guys really believe that Chevron is worse? Well, no. I guess what I'm hearing is that their track record, commensurate with a company who's been in business or has as many projects as they have, is probably not any worse than anyone else's, and probably better than most.
Yeah, but it is probably the most extreme harassment lawsuit, though, against this lawyer. So what I'm asking for is a good faith back channel that we can maybe talk off the record with someone there. They can choose to ignore it, but then it's going to heat up here. And
I don't think they'd ignore you. I think what you're likely going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that they won't talk to you, but you're going to get the guy whose job it is to talk to you. He's probably one of the guys one of these New York DC guys.
Yeah.
He's probably the last one you really want to talk to. If that's who they're going to put in your face.
Well, look, we're willing to have.
I mean, I can't promise a thing, but that would be my expectation.
Well, if possible, bring it on, and it's a good faith backdoor effort to prevent things heating up, which they may also appreciate to have that opportunity.
Yeah, and my guess is they are not a combative group as a group.
They are actually.
If you had told me Texaco, who I knew better, I might have think there's something really to it. Because Texaco was more old school, more like the old BPs or whatnot. It's in the way they have.
I'm going to send you an article.
Honestly, they were run more by engineers and lawyers, where Chevron had more sort of geologists and technical people at the very, very top. Texaco was more of a Wall Streetish kind of oil company.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, what I'll send you an article about it that gives you a little bit of background, but because we actually perceive them to be, we the environmental community, as much more combative than any other oil company, and maybe we're wrong, but that's the way they're perceived, we're looking to someone to... They have an opportunity to de-escalate, if they'd like, in good faith, with reasonable people.
I'm curious about that, because I'm not sure, by combative, do you mean defensive, or do you mean
the aggressive slap lawsuits, harassment against... Anyway, I'll send you some things so that you'll see. And look, maybe compared to the others, they're not as bad, but if the perceived coming in here kind of, big bad oil company trying to move into our waters, and our waters also our country's not ready for them and ready for bad things. I think there's an opportunity to de-escalate, and we're asking for your good offices informally to give them that opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm more than happy to try and do that.
Thank you.
I don't know how successful I'll be, but I wanted to at least understand. And I guess the other question is, there's always talk about oil spills.
Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge at this point, what we're talking about is methane.
Yeah, but as you know, there's different layers, and also there's different licenses. I don't know if Noble has won any of the oil drilling licenses, but with this gas, as you know, there's often oil. But it's also...
There are liquids in the system here, but the liquids to date now are very light associated liquids.
Okay.
There's been no black oil produced out of any of the Noble acreage that I'm aware of.
Okay.
In fact, I don't think there's been any liquids produced, period. I think that it's biogenic gas,
right.
which does not have liquids typically with it.
Yeah.
So an oil spill, at least for the Noble production at this point, I don't believe is germane to the discussion. That doesn't mean somewhere down the line someone might not find some.
Right. No, I
hope they do. I'm working hard to try and get somebody to try. But
yeah.
But to my understanding of the system now, geochemistry being what it is, an oil spill isn't really in the cards.
Okay, good.
It's much more so in the cards. Something should happen to the ship at the refinery on shore or at the dock.
Yeah.
Then you got a problem. So I guess one of my questions would be, what is Israel doing in terms of the port and near the refinery for spill mitigation?
Yes.
It relates directly, and it's probably the much more direct threat at this point in time.
Okay, that's good information. I will find out. I'm told by experts I trust that we're underprepared, but I'll ask about the port and the refinery. And
you might be, because if you're going to have an oil spill, that's what it's going to be anytime in the foreseeable future.
Interesting.
And it could be massive.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens if somebody bombs a ship as it's, just after it's filled at the refinery, or just after it's, or I should say just before it's offloaded?
In the Middle East? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It never happened there, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying there's got to be a mitigation plan. There's no way that there isn't.
There really isn't much of a mitigation plan. I can tell you that, unfortunately. So, look, part of what we want to actually say to Chevron is, look, if you're coming into our waters, maybe you can get some of the key equipment and the training and the mitigation plan, and you can be in favor of it rather than fight it, and it might add a little bit to you.
That leads me right to the second thing I was thinking. I keep going back to Noble or Chevron. In which case is Israel better off?
Yeah.
I can't help but think you're much better off with Chevron for the very reason that they've got however many decades of history offshore, drilling offshore, dealing with these things, being prepared for them.
Yeah.
Noble has almost none. Honestly, the pearl in the Noble deal is what they really bought it for, the onshore Texas and Permian Basin stuff. That's the golden ticket in this. The Israel side, it's going to produce some cash, but until they develop that export market, believe me, Chevron did not buy this for the Israeli domestic market.
It's so funny because we're based here, so there's always like an ethnocentric kind of the head. No, this is helpful.
I've been trying to talk Chevron. I can tell you this personally. I've been talking to Chevron for a year now about getting involved in Israel. Before nothing to do with Noble. Just coming to Israel and trying to explore there. And in no way did it I shouldn't say in no way, but it wasn't, for considering all the places they were around the world, it wasn't a high priority for them. In terms, because the domestic market is very low. It's a small market. And, there are gas projects like Gorgon in Australia, the other things that are similar to what Noble has, larger. They're orders of magnitude larger in terms of the size of the project, the amount of money it generates. Israel is the reason that Noble is there and not Exxon, and not Chevron. And if you'd notice, there are no other major oil companies there.
Right.
It's because the size of the prize relative to what they're doing globally is not that great.
That's interesting. Because
look. Yeah.
Here they play it up.
Largely because the export business isn't quite there yet. There's a little bit going into Egypt. through the LNG, but that, no one's going to hang their hat on that.
Yeah.
So, the domestic market's a good little market. It's good for a noble-sized company.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the bread and butter of a Chevron.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
It's not a bad fit.
Right.
But in and of itself, if all Noble had was Israel, in other words, they didn't have the rest of their portfolio, which is largely North America.
Yeah, then Chevron wouldn't be interested. Got it.
I doubt they would have made the acquisition. I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
But I doubt.
Well, look, first of all, I really think, I want to just thank you for taking the time. I learned a lot of things from it and really appreciate your perspective and your experience. So whatever you can do on the good faith front of opening up a back channel, I do think there's an opportunity for win-win and de-escalation, should they want it. And thank you for conveying whatever message you feel is appropriate.
Yeah, again, I'm not relaying this message for anybody other than myself, not the office, not the government of Israel, and not Chevron. But, if you're... The way this call was originally pitched to me, that they're concerned about Chevron as an operator role, relative to Noble.
Yeah.
I think those concerns are wildly misplaced. I would rather have Chevron, with their experience and eye to safety while drilling and operations.
Yeah.
I know the kind of money they spend on making sure their operations are as safe as they can be.
Yeah.
And the numbers and the time spent are staggering.
Amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. I think there's also an element of the environmental movement standing in solidarity with some of the victims of previous spills, which may have been only on the Texaco dime. I'll double check that rather than the Chevron one.
If I remember, I guess Ecuador is the one that you're most familiar with. I'm thinking I'm not. If I remember, that really wasn't an issue of spills per se, was it? Deforestation, building roads.
No, they didn't do the pits right, and there's all this different. I can send you some material, but the main thing is. I remember when that
was all going on, but I remember there were a lot of. It was a real convoluted thing.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, I want Chevron to drop the case against the Jewish lawyer who was pursuing it, and let's see if they're.
I never heard about that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
This guy's sitting in prison? Or is
he has an ankle bracelet. He's at home for almost a year now.
Okay.
And, it makes people here worried about his treatment and if that's the way Chevron's going to waltz into our market.
So he obviously he's been arrested.
No, there's court cases and all sorts of. I'll send you the stuff. I'm not an expert on it.
Okay, I'm just curious. He must have been convicted of something that had ankle bracelet on. So that's what I was wondering.
No, he doesn't want to give up. He was a lawyer for the class action lawsuit, and he doesn't want to give up his computer and his cell phone with all the data of his clients. So he's being held in contempt. But it's all exaggerated, whatever stuff. We hope that Chevron are nice people and smart people and are willing to work with the environmental community in the state of Israel in a positive way, and we appreciate if you can facilitate that conversation.
Okay, like I said, I can make no promises.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm so pessimistic I'll be able to do you much good. But if my personal opinion helped at all, that's great. If not, no.
I appreciate that, David. All right, well, thank you so much for making the time, and I'll also send you a little bit of stuff, too, just for your own...
okay, I appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Stay healthy.
Okay, you too.
Looking forward to hearing. Thank you. Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.